Step one is find reference. So for me, I like to go on Pinterest, and this is my feed. You can see there's a lot of awesome stuff that just sort of comes up at random, and you just kind of pick one, something that inspires you, something that gives you a feeling, hopefully, so that you have a connection to it somehow. For example, if I was going to choose a new one, which I'm not because I already have a reference for the purposes of this video, I would probably choose something like, I've been working on backgrounds, so maybe something like this because it's really simple and I could do something very cool with it, probably even impose a character into this scene. But like I said, I already have reference, so let's just jump to step two once you go and get your reference. So having chose my reference, which is this lovely lady in a swimsuit here, I am going to now show you what it's like to squint at an image and simplify it down to the big shapes. We're going to simulate this by going up to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. As you can see, with 4.8 pixels as the radius, we begin to blur the image. And as we blur it further, the details become less and less fine and harder to discern. This is a little too much if you're squinting your eyes to this point where this is all you see. The edges are completely lost and you've pretty much lost your reference, so it doesn't have much purpose. In any case, I like to pretty much squint my eyes to about this level. And at this level, we can see that the shapes are really apparent. It's not so much about the details anymore, which beginners often get caught up in. Just to sort of drive the point home, I'm gonna grab green right here and just show you that things tend to look very simple at this stage. So we have these nice little altered kind of triangles for the arms, and for the torso, you can see it's just sort of an hourglass, a very simplified one. And the neck is kind of like a trapezoid with concave sides. The head is an egg or bean shape. And things just tend to look very, very, roughed out at this stage. It's not about having a super clear, super crisp picture. We're squinting so that we can see things simply and thus replicate them easier. Let's go to step three. Step three. Here we are just kind of measuring the proportions, and just for your reference, we have step two up on the screen as well. So I use a grid sometimes when I am thinking about proportion, just because measurement is important for any job. That goes for engineers, carpenters, scientists, mathematicians, you name it. Numbers are a part of the process, and those numbers can be very simple, such as these squares, where we'll use these to count the units of a given figure or object or scene. And artists aren't exempt from this, and you shouldn't feel bad about using it. Everybody measures for their job, and if you want to do awesome art, then measuring can really help you get proportions down before you have them in your imagination. So in this case, you can see that, for example, the head fits right here into this 2 by 3 area, meaning that we have 6 squares right there that showcase to us that the head is approximately 6 squares in terms of our measurement. Likewise, the shoulder span, say, is about 4 squares. So it's just an easy way to have some kind of linear, logical, quantifiable data that you can use to figure out the proportions. Without the grid, we can say, okay, well, the shoulder span is about half of the height of the torso, for example. And in her case, the shoulder span, because her arms are flared out, almost look bigger than the hips, which is a little bit different than your standard female figure. So comparing things, you can do it very quantitatively, or you can do it just sort of intuitively and visually. However you want to do it, take some time to measure and think about the relationships of your various proportions next to other objects. For example, if we see that the forearm is about this long and the upper arm is about that long, the upper arm looks like it is longer than the forearm in this case, because we're not including the hand, which is only that long. It's just a way of gauging proportion and thus helping you create a more accurate drawing, which as a beginner can be one of the most difficult steps to kind of get right or closer to right in degree. Next, let's talk about step 4. For this step, I just used the same grid I used on her figure, but scaled up, and I went in, and as you can see, even though I lost the footage, the original footage, I had a GIF exported for the blog post, which will help you with this. But basically, I just go in and create a full grid that scales up a little bit, and since it scales uniformly, I know that the proportions are going to be the same. And I'll just take the grid and use that as reference while I'm looking at the already measured figure, and that gives me everything I need to know in terms of how far to place things like the eyes, the nose, the ears, the hair, etc. All that stuff just comes into play as a result of already having measured stuff out and now just taking those measurements and drawing freehand using the grid to help guide the process. Again, I want to stress that this is not cheating. This is not some cheap way of doing it. This is perfectly legitimate, and artists have done this for centuries, whether to scale up their sketches or to better understand their models or their photos or what have you. Just take the time to measure it out with the grid, or if you want to do this freehand and do it more intuitively, that's also an option. But either way, this is my approach when it comes to using the grid. It's just to have the reference up, have a separate grid that is blank, and then draw based on the reference in the blank grid. Let's move on to step 5. So what you're seeing now is a time lapse of me going over the focal point, namely the face, with much cleaner lines. It's just the default hard round brush. There's nothing special going on. I am rotating the canvas to help get better line quality, and I'm making sure just to spend a good amount of time on the face because it is the focal point. After which, I just generally work my way downward from the head if it's a figure piece, or if I'm working on an environment piece, I usually work from the sky forward. But in this case, I'm just going through and correcting any errors as they arise, making sure that everything is in place, and using my previous sketch, which had the grid underneath it, I can take the grid away now and just begin to detail everything up based on my imagination. And that's pretty much step 5. So here's the final result. Let's talk about step 6. Yeah, I actually am sincere about that. If you want to get good, you're really going to have to take yourself through the process several times, iterating on 1% improvements each time, like the Japanese Ikigai principle. Basically, all you have to do is just be diligent. Take yourself through the process maybe 2 to 3 times a day and see what you can glean that is new each time. See what you can fix, what you can improve. Just set yourself a measurable goal and go for it. Whether that's 100 heads, 1,000 trees, whatever you want to draw, however you want to draw it. You now have a process you can use to take yourself through that process and continue your growth. I want to thank you for watching. I'm Taylor Payton of thebeginnerdrawingcourse.com. I have a blog post in the description box that elaborates on these 5 steps even further. I appreciate your subscribes, your thumbs up, and your shares, everything in between. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and happy drawing. Thank you for the reference. Now you must die.